Okay, big week in, well, actually, kind of small week for AI, depending on how you look at it, because AI moves so fast that even though we had some kind of big things drop this week, it didn't feel all that crazy. But yeah, let's go ahead and start off with OpenAI. They announced their new memories, where it's going to keep kind of all of the conversations that you've had in its memory and kind of keep that context. That way, if you switch conversations and you want to talk about something else, it'll kind of remember some of the other stuff you guys talked about. Personally, I've seen some like, oh, okay, I can understand that. And I think for your everyday user, that would be a good thing. But for me, it's kind of, I feel like it's almost more of a pain to have it keep context because I talk about different things, but they're very similar. And so I don't want it to switch those kind of, or not understand which thing I'm talking about when I'm talking about it. But yeah, that's kind of like something that I kind of thought about in the general, like what I think about this new product. What's kind of your thoughts, Johnny?
Yeah, I think a lot of these LLM providers have a bit of a problem in that there's no stickiness to the product necessarily. They say, "Oh, I know ChatGPT, so I'll go there." But like in our case, we'll hop around between the different models and we have no loyalty to any model. And I think for the everyday user, the ability to give them something that keeps them there is kind of like the reward miles. It's like, hey, I've earned some miles, so now there's value in me sticking with that platform. This is a similar thing if they're trying to keep people on that platform, which means that they'll over time create more memories or more information about the person, and they can personalize further. I think that is their big moat into getting that person into their ecosystem forever. From that perspective, it's really a great strategy. They're the first company to really introduce this idea of more long-term memory. For people like us, super users, yeah, it's definitely a bit of a pain because we're switching contexts, whether it's between different projects, whether it's for different clients, and there are ways to go about that and use projects. But I don't want it if I'm working on a client project. It thinks that that's a part of my memory, and now that's sort of forever baked in my memory. So I think there are some cases for super users where it's not going to be perfect, but I get why for the everyday user this is a brilliant strategy to personalize things for them and keep them in their ecosystem and bring more value over time.
See,
Yeah.
I almost think that it may end up, and again, I'm the conspiracy theorist of the group, but I don't want it to know that much about me. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like that's almost a little too scary. Like, I'm going to be more careful what I talk to it about now because now that I know it's keeping those memories and, I don't know where that's going, where that's being stored, who's using that for what, are they going to sell that data, whatever. So it's like, to me, it's almost like a little bit of a turnoff to using Chat GPT instead of Google now is I'm like, I don't want all that information necessarily
Yeah.
stored. So that was another thought I had too, is it's like, do I want to give them all that information? Like when I felt like it was
Yeah.
almost anonymous or like, it didn't keep that memory, it felt better than I guess now. I don't know. That's my take.
Yeah, I agree with you. And John, you bring up a good point with that, right? Like they're kind of targeting the everyday user, and it makes a ton of sense, right? It's going to streamline, it's going to just make it more effective, for the average person. But I agree. I think, the question is how transparent are they going to be with what is saved? What settings are they going to give us to be able to update or fine tune the history? And to your point, Tim, kind of be able to delete things also that we don't want it to remember possibly. So again, I think that's going to be huge for this to really take off, right? I think privacy and just that flexibility of people being able to edit the history is going to be important.
Yeah, again, for a subset of users, privacy is a concern. The reality is for most people, value always trumps privacy. And TikTok is a perfect example of this. You've got billions of people who use TikTok every day, and TikTok is learning everything about you and then giving you content based on what it's learning about you. And those people love it. And if you take it away from them, they're going to be very unhappy. So I think OpenAI is going to execute on that exact same strategy.
Yeah, I feel like most people give up their privacy anyway, so to them it's not even going to be a second thought. To me, I don't know why it's always been something I've just been weary of, but
Real quick, I was going to say, Johnny, so for you, coming from the perspective of productivity and, project management and more on the business side of things, like what ideally does it look like, for you when this happens? Like, again, to your point of kind of switching contexts and having that ability to, you don't want to intermingle or intertwine your histories or memories, I should say. Like, how does that? Have you had a chance to kind of think about ideally how that would look?
OpenAI already has a feature called projects. Most people don't even know it exists. Basically, that context stays within that project. So there's kind of already a workaround for it, but it's another step I have to remember to do. And I have to self organize pretty well, which I'm not very good at to begin with. For me, in the past, when I wanted to switch context, I just opened a new chat window. And even in the past, they had been working on this memory for quite some time because I'd say, give me an example of how I would solve this. And they would always give me an example in the context of my actual real world product. Which tells me they were already doing this stuff. Now I think it's a little more formal and it's also probably maybe super powered. But yeah, I haven't started to use projects yet. I really should. But again, it's kind of annoying for me because it's another thing I have to remember to do.
Yeah.
The other way around that would be just not being logged in and starting a conversation there, because then it couldn't be keeping a memory.
Yeah, but then you have rate limits and then you don't have access to the right models or the newest models, for example.
You're just gonna have to pay 2 subscriptions.
The other thing that's interesting about this is, Grok releases a model and Gemini releases a model, and they're all one upping each other in different criteria on their models. This memory thing might be the first release that takes a little bit longer for the next guy to catch up to. All right.
Mhm.
Cause I think Gemini might be the next one to do it. And so maybe they create a bit of a buffer there to try to get ahead, because, as Sam Altman said on the TED podcast, that they doubled their user base in the last 2 weeks, which is
It's
incredible because they were
insane.
already
Yeah.
humongous. So now you've got all these new users and you're going to apply memory to all their conversations and you're going to build that affinity with those users. And if they try a different LLM that doesn't have that, they're probably going to come back to ChatGPT. It's going to feel like it knows them, like it's
Right.
like a
It's
personal
more
assistant.
personalized. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing that for someone like me, I have a pretty bad memory. Like I'm kind of excited about the memory part, like the things it can remind you of, like from past conversations, or we'll see how intuitive it becomes, right? But I think there's some advantages.
Well, there's so many cool things that you can build on this. I mean, they have this idea of like a scheduler, once a month.
Automate and yeah,
Tell me over the last month how I've been feeling just based on my conversations with you. That's a simple thing, but there's just all kinds of unique things you could do when you have memory and then you have scheduling all built into the tool itself. So as a regular user, you could do this. I don't mean as a
right,
developer.
right,
I mean,
right.
as an everyday person that is not technical, you can start to set these systems up.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, it should be interesting to watch kind of how it progresses and what use cases come out of it.
Did you guys hear? I don't know if this is accurate, John, but is it true that they got an investment this past week from SoftBank, OpenAI?
Yeah, it was, I think, more than a week ago,
Oh, okay,
but
okay.
it was, I think, a 30 something $billion investment on a $400 billion,
My
I
gosh.
think it was 40 billion on.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
on
it
think it
was
was.
400
it was
billion
huge.
valuation. Yeah, it's a big one. So now they have new cash to subsidize and continue to buy more
Yeah,
GPUs and more data centers.
insane. Cool. I didn't know if that was true. I didn't know if that was factual, but crazy.
Yeah, 40 billion, the largest private technology deal ever.
And almost as shocking is the one that Ilya Subskever got, super intelligence. It's in stealth. No one knows what it does. And it just raised a huge round as well. So
Yeah, Johnny. So Ilya's safe superintelligence raised $2 billion at a $32 billion valuation. And what's crazy is, as you said, it's in stealth mode. There is no product yet. So that's incredible.
All right, well, let's shift over to some more news in AI. So Google obviously has put out Gemini 2.5 Pro. People have been using that a lot. In fact, I've been using it a lot more. I kind of talked some crap about it the last podcast, I think it was, but I've been using it almost exclusively for about a week now, just to number one, take advantage of the free, but also really kind of like see how well it really does stack up to and whatnot. And I've been super impressed, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Right now, we're going to talk about the Google Cloud Next and the ADKs that they just announced. Johnny, you want to go ahead and give us a little bit of insight there as far as what you've seen so far?
yeah, so I mean, there was two things from that conference that I'm interested in because as a developer, obviously they did the TPU announcement, which was huge. But for the sake of this conversation, it was the agent platform and the Fire Studio, which is basically another no code IDE. On the agent framework, before we get into what Google did, just to give a little background on what an agent is, in its most primitive form, all it is basically a loop. You know, you say, hey, just continue to execute this thing. And at some point, when you reach your goal, then you can exit, right? And so in the world of agents, you have a goal. Here's what I want to achieve. And then you call the LLM and then you get the response. Did I achieve the goal? No. You know, call the LLM, you know, so you continue to do that. That's the simplest form, right? And then you have all these agent platforms that have sprung up that do coordination and orchestration and tool use, function calling, and then you get into multi-agent where one agent can call another agent. And this sort of like revolution of agents started in 2023 with, you know, I think this is fascinating. The history started with a guy, Yohei Nakajima, I think his name is. He created a tool called Baby AGI, was just a rudimentary agent that all it did was can create a list of tasks to run and then prioritize them and execute them. And this was mind blowing. And the thing about that guy is that he's a VC, not a developer, and he builds things in public on the side. And I think that's what's really cool about the industry is you don't need necessarily to be, you know, credentialed. I mean, obviously he's a smart guy, but he's not a developer. He's just a regular guy in VC that decided, hey, you can call these LLMs in the loop. And so after Baby AGI came another one called Auto GPT, and that gave it access to the internet and file system and read write. And from there, it just kept growing and growing. And then the first sort of more commercial version was OpenAI's Assistance API, which kind of let you do tool use within the LLM itself. It wasn't a multi-agent thing. It didn't have coordination or orchestration, but it did have tool use, and it had the idea of like a threaded conversation that you can maintain context over time, as opposed to having to like pass the entire context in each sort of message. And so really that's where agents kind of started from. And then you've got these platforms that sprung up. The most popular one is probably Crew AI, and then LangChain has one as well. And so Google's take on this is really interesting because really what I think they're going after is the enterprise space.
Mm.
They've created a bunch of new primitives. So you look at it like, oh, it feels over engineered. But I think it makes sense because for them, where the money is going to be in this is going to be in the integrations between the sales forces and the ERP systems. And they have all kinds of requirements that the indie developer or the hacker on the weekends doesn't care about. So I think this is really going after that segment. So if you're like a beginner trying to get into agents, I'm not sure that's the right approach as much as maybe a Crew AI or some of these other simpler tools. But I think it's a great play for them because if they can own that enterprise space, that'd be a huge opportunity for them to like be in the center of cloud infrastructure for artificial intelligence.
So these are going to work with other models, right, Johnny? So does it have to be hosted on like their cloud service, or how are they going to continue to make money off of this if they're going to allow people to build kind of with other models and stuff?
All these agent platforms do have the ability to work with pretty much any model. Really, they're just kind of plumbing that you need to make agents work. Now, anybody could build their own agent platform, you know, but once you start building something that needs security and reliability and reduces hallucination and has guardrails and constraints and built-in integrations, you're going to want to reach for something that's a little more mature. And that's really what they're providing. It's probably the most mature platform when it comes to the enterprise space. How are they going to make money on this? I don't know that that's really the play here as much as they want to be the center of the AI world. A lot of these companies will release, you know, open source tools all the time, and their hope is, hey, since you're using,
Adopt it.
yeah, you're using Google's ADK, you might as well host on Google Cloud.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, I was actually honestly a little bit surprised that they built it that way. Just Google being Google, I was kind of surprised they were opening it up to all the models and kind of almost like pushing that even in the talk and stuff. So it was pretty interesting to see them do that.
But you have to. If you are closed, you will get no traction
Yeah.
because people know that, look, you might be the best model right now, but next week, if OpenAI releases a great model, we want to use that. And if you're locking us into your model, we're not going to use
Yeah.
your platform. One more thing that I thought was worth bringing up is last week we covered Llama and we covered their models, and the metrics showed that they were very high on the LMS arena. I think they were number two right behind Gemini, which is incredible for an open source model. And there's a little controversy around this, but it turns out that they were using more of a specialized model for that test that did really well in conversation. And they've since replaced that model with their actual model that they released to the public. and that model's gone from number 2 on the rankings to number, I think, 23,
Wow.
which is barely above what their Llama 3 model was at. So
Brutal.
very disappointing. The other thing that happened is when they released a model to all these providers, because when you have a model, there's a lot of configuration you could do, and there's defaults. So when someone goes to the model, they immediately type in write this function for me, or what's the history of whatever. There's parameters like temperature that you can set that basically says, hey, how creative do you want me to be, or how factual do you want me to be? And for a lot of providers, they didn't immediately tune everything correctly. And so that's why some of the results were really bad in the beginning. I think they've since tuned them to be more reliable. So hopefully the results are better than when we tested early on. But again, their drop in the LMS arena was pretty
Yeah.
shocking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing that a huge company like that, all that money, all the resources can fumble like this. It blows my mind.
Is this the first that we hear of something like that? Has anyone else done that?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think it was intentional to start, but it was definitely a fumble, as Tim said. If you go to LMS Arena, they'll provide you 2 windows, and you ask a question, you get 2 responses, you vote. I like this one better. And that's kind of how they figure out their rankings. But yeah, initially they were doing really well, but now that they got the actual normal model there, it's not doing as well as the original one did.
That's interesting. I wonder how they respond to that now, or what's next, you know?
Well, they've got their conference coming up, so I'm sure they'll address it.
Oh,
Their
okay. Yeah.
conference is in 2 weeks, so I'm sure we'll hear all about it.
Oh,
We might even hear about Llama 5 at that point because they're going to have to figure out how to fix
make up
this.
for it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's funny. So really quick before we shift. So like I was doing a little bit of research. Again, I'm kind of the average person. I'm not in tech. I'm not a developer. So I did a little research on AI agents, and I know it's fairly basic understanding, but pretty mind blowing, like seeing it in action, right? So I think for the average person out there that's listening, what are some things that, John, you are excited to kind of see play out? Share with you guys an example I saw. Again, super basic example, but just impressive, the level and how quickly it's improving, right? So basically, it was a customer service agent. Again, real basic, but the level of, I had seen an example probably a few months ago. And I think, there's a lot of big corporations out there that have already implemented this and it's fairly poor. But there was this guy on YouTube that showed a demo with this agent, and he's having a conversation, and man, I mean, it was like 98% of the way of like speaking to an actual human, like how the responses were and how it walked them through the issue, and like, and it ultimately solved it for them. But it was like mind blowing. So I know that's going to improve, drastically. And again, that's just kind of basic, but it just, I'm curious, like, what does that do to the market? What does that do to the, to the economy and whatnot? But what examples have you thought of any or seen any examples?
Yeah. And just to kind of walk through what that agent is doing and the one you described, that's actually a really simple use case of an agent where you just have one agent, right, which is a customer service agent, and you're the other sort of party in that, and you're talking to that agent, and the agent has access to data about your account, whether it's billing information or account information. So it's able to pull that. It might be fine tuned to respond in a certain way, or it might be using the out of the box model. I'm not sure. I get a question, I maybe look up on some information, I come back to LM and I compose that answer and give it back to you. And then I wait and I've got memory. I've got context of the entire
Yes.
conversation. So
Yeah.
that's almost the simplest form of an agent. Now you think of a more complex use case might be something like, think of us as being agents, right? We're humans, but that's what agents are trying to do. They're trying to be specialized people. So I'm a developer. Ron, you're the sales guy, and Tim, you're the construction guy. Let's just say that's our expertise. And now we can interact with each other and delegate to each other and say, hey, I don't know how to build a house, so I'm going to delegate that over to Tim. And then Tim's going to build the house and then return, hey, your house is done. And then Ron is like, oh, I'm the guy that knows how to sell it. So he's going to go out to market and sell it. And that's a multi-agent, you know,
Yeah.
scenario there. Agents that are specialized. And then in the multi-agent example, you can have different ones that are specialized at different things. So even in that customer service example, they could have built another agent that was a billing, specialized billing, and another one that was specialized at,
Yeah. And I
you
think
know,
that's what it was.
yeah.
Because there was some complexity in terms of the challenge that he was giving the agent, and it figured it out. And I was like, that that had to be that.
Yeah, and
Impressive.
to the extent you can constrain that into a role and giving it, a system prompt and a tight instruction set, it's going
Yeah.
to perform better. and give it
Right.
access to the right tools, right?
Right.
Because you don't
Right.
want to give it access to all the tools. You want to give it access to tools that that role needs to perform.
Now that
That's
to
a,
me, again, coming from very basic understanding, to me is what's truly going to change our landscape. What is that going to do? Like it's going to disrupt. It's going
for
to
sure.
disrupt. Yeah.
For sure.
Crazy.
And a lot of it comes down to whether we say, look, now that these agents can do everything, does it mean we need less people? Or is it more of a, now that we could do all these things, do we do more things?
Yes.
Because the experience we provide today is poor. So why not provide a way better experience with humans in the
Yes.
loop all over the place and the agents doing a lot of the rudimentary,
Right.
task oriented work? And now we can collectively maybe go up an abstraction layer to do more high value work, more
Yeah.
person to person, type things.
Correct.
So I don't
Yeah.
know what direction we head in, but there's definitely a case to be made to say, hey, because we have more capability, that means we should be doing more.
Right.
I'm kind of hoping too we see a little bit of a shift in, we've always pushed people to get the most out of them, and you work this many hours, and kind of just always pushing the envelope to try to get as much as we can out of each person. And companies like Google or Facebook or places like that have kind of changed the paradigm of like what a work week looks like and what days off look like I have a buddy that works for a tech company that they literally don't have like a limit on PTO days. It's just like whatever you feel like you need is what you need to take. And I was like, that just blows my mind in like my world, because I could never do that. But maybe I'm hoping that because a lot of this rudimentary stuff is going to be done by agents, and we will have more time, that they will see a better work life balance all
Yeah.
the way around. I doubt it, but I'm hopeful.
Hey Tim, hate to break it to you, but that whole take whatever time you need is actually
The opposite.
not what you think it is. It usually means people take less vacation because they don't feel like
Yeah.
they're losing anything.
Yeah, no, I get it. I totally understand it, but it still blew my mind when I heard it, because I was like,
The
it,
concept. Yes. Yes. Indeed.
yes.
The concept is there because companies save money by not having to administer it.
Yes.
And so they say, take as much as you want, be responsible. Most people don't take that much time. A few do, but most people take less time because they're not saying, oh, I'm going to lose time. And for the company, they don't have to administer the 2 weeks and do all that stuff. So that's a secret in the tech world.
Yeah.
Yes. And in fact, Johnny, I had read, this is a while back, but it was proven that that is actually the case, that there is a study done. And yes, there's less PTO taken if it's unlimited PTO. So
Yep.
that's true.
Yeah, I actually went and did a little research after he told me about that, and found out that that was why that they did that. And I was like, okay, that's super smart, but also it still seems crazy to me, because
Yeah,
my
totally.
job, it's so dependent on having guys where they're supposed to be at the right time, and depending on them to be there. And so to me it was just like blew my mind that anybody offered that type of thing. But
Yeah, no
maybe
doubt.
we'll see more of that kind of stuff, or better circumstances all around.
Yeah, but what was the term I was going to say? Kind of just improve life, right? For people, like, more focus on that, on well-being and stuff. But I think it depends, it depends on the company. It depends on the leadership. We'll see.
And then the other thing that came out was Firebase Studio, which was pretty cool. I wish I'd gotten more time to play with it before we had this pod. I've been so like locked in on the project that I'm doing right now that I didn't want to like step away from it to do a bunch of stuff on there. But I did watch some YouTube videos about it. I did like kind of read the docs on it. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting is you can import a project you already have. So let's say you've been working on Bolt, you can
Wow.
import that in and continue working there. I don't think Bolt has that ability, or Lovable. I'm not positive on that, but I thought that was pretty cool that you could bring a project into it and continue to work on it there. And obviously, with it being built on Firebase, there's a lot of capabilities there that not everyone else has. So, John or Ron, you wanna kick off with kind of your thoughts on it?
I'll let you, John. I actually have a question for you guys, and it ties into your comment, Tim, at the start. But yeah, maybe Johnny can talk a little bit about his take on it.
Yeah, so I tried a couple projects and I got stuck. The initial build was fast, and then after that, things started to slowly fall apart for me. I don't know if maybe they're just getting a lot of traffic. There's some general issues, but Google's been down this path before. Google's tried initiatives where they, have like app building platforms, and they always in my opinion, they always over engineer it. And I'm not saying this isn't going to have any use cases. I'm sure it will. It is Google. They have enormous distribution, but I don't think they win. I don't think they win the hearts and minds of people like us. They have all the the pieces in place. Like you said, they have Firebase, they've got Google Cloud. They can really make this work. But just like their LLM product, it kind of put barriers unintended in the way because they're really trying to push you into their ecosystem. And in doing so, they make things harder than they need to be. And that's been my experience so far. It hasn't worked out. On the flip side, I tried out another tool that was also another no code, a tool called Convex Chef. They released it a couple days ago, and you don't even have to log in to start using it. So they make it super easy to get up and running. So I tried Google Studio and I tried Convex side by side, building the same thing because I was testing both of them out as they're new. And I had tremendous success with Convex, and I just cannot get past certain things with Google Studio. The experience for me on Convex was fairly pleasant. The experience on Google Studio was fairly frustrating for me.
Frustrating.
So that's really my first look at it so far. They both have tremendous feature sets, but again, this is what Convex is going to do. Like this is what they're building. Versus Google Studio is just another sort of thing they're laying onto their huge ecosystem of 1,000 tools. So outside of distribution, I don't know if they have other advantages.
Are we using Google Studio and Firebase Studio kind of that's the same
Interchangeably.
thing, or are we talking about two different things here?
Google Firebase Studio,
Okay.
Firebase Studio.
Okay.
Got it,
I
got
just wanted to make sure that we were talking about the same thing.
Me too.
Because
Sorry.
yeah, because I know Google Studio AI is like their like
Yes.
kind of
Yeah.
platform or whatever, but just wanted to make sure we were talking about Firebase.
Again, talking about the Google ecosystem, you also get lost in the language because they got so many things. It's really there's really too many entry points, and it's very easy to get lost in. And that for me is always what pushes me away from it. And I use actually Google Studio. Sorry, I use Cloud
Yeah.
for hosting my VMs because it's actually simpler, in my opinion, than AWS. But beyond that, like things get pretty complicated.
All right, Ronnie, what was your question?
Yeah, my question is this, and you mentioned it at the start, Tim. You said like you haven't had a chance to try it out. You've kind of you're down a path. You've been down a couple paths now, and now you've stuck with one for the long term, at least in the
Kind
short
of,
term.
yeah.
So, but prior to this podcast, I was thinking to myself, like, is it possible that it's too late? Getting into it a little late here with the cursors and Bolt and Windsurf kind of already making a splash, already getting a ton of users. And, early on you had, Tim and John, you guys had time to kind of play with each one and kind of make your decision and move forward. And now here's Firebase. And I'm thinking, what does it take? Number one, are they too late? Number two, what's it going to take for a user or power user like you, Tim, to make the switch? You know what I mean? And you kind of mentioned it now, right? You're like, you didn't make time for it.
Yeah. I don't honestly think I could switch back to like a Bolts or Lovable. Maybe again for a quick prototype of just something before I take it into an IDE now. But now that I've gotten so used to using IDEs and the power that you have with those and how far you can branch off and really make what you want, I don't know that I could jump back into it. I think what Firebase could have had a huge win here because again, they've got the whole ecosystem and stuff is already just kind of like built into it. And so that's where I thought they were going to have a huge advantage. Again, I haven't played with it, so I'm going to save my judgment until I actually do. But I was thinking that they were actually going to have a huge advantage over Bolt and Lovable and maybe even take a lot of the traction that they had. But yeah, I mean, if they put it out and it's, a little buggy or not quite where it needs to be, then again, just I feel like a lot of these AI things, they're just trying to be as quick as they can instead of flushing out, a lot of these issues. And I feel like we're almost past that now. Like you almost have to have some of that stuff flushed out to gain that traction. What do you think, Johnny?
I have a couple thoughts. One is that we're really in the first inning still. So I don't think
Yeah.
it's too late. People who do development for a living, a large majority of them are still not even doing any AI assisted development, which is you think is mind blowing, but a
Yeah.
lot of them are still not able to do it because they can't really use it at work yet, or they're not bought into it. And so a lot of them are still making the transition slowly over. The other thing is that developers really have no loyalty. If their company has restrictions says you must use
That's
this,
one thing.
that's different. But if you're working on your own side projects, your own startup, developers have no loyalty to a platform. If a platform comes out and it's better, you best believe you're going to make that change. And developers have to stay on the cusp of new technology because otherwise you get left behind. It's just something when you're in this industry, you just know you have to always learn and see what's coming and test things out. If Firebase Studio came out and it was great, I'd be like, that's my go-to tool for that scenario. If I want to get things up and running quickly, if I already want the database hooked up and authentication, all that, I might run it on Firebase Studio. So yeah, there's no loyalty for me, and I think for a lot of developers that's the case too. So I think it's still super early.
Got it.
Now, what I will say is that it's interesting how a lot of people are still not using AI in their day to day, and I actually think that there's one company that's actually having the biggest impact. Can you guys take a guess who that is?
Meta?
No, Canva.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
Really?
should have known
Canva.
that. I should have known that. Yep.
Canva, I think is converting more people to AI. Well, will convert more people to AI than any other company.
Yes.
Why? Because first of all, they have a huge audience, a lot of users. I think like 4 million users around the world. They are the users for teachers, for coaches, for small businesses, for influencers,
You name
basically
it.
people who don't want to do technology but need to solve a problem. And they
Yes.
are releasing all kinds of AI tools that are for that user.
All within their app, like all
Yeah.
within this ecosystem that's so easy to use.
Yeah. So I think they are the AI,
Yeah.
powerhouse that no
Yes.
one thinks about. And they release a no code tool as well. So you can actually build a website or an application on Canva now. They call it
That's crazy.
Canva AI or Canva code, one of those. But they are the dark horse in this race, and
Yes. Yes.
maybe not for hardcore developers, but for your everyday user, watch out. Yeah.
Yeah, no doubt. I know someone, in fact, that's how I was saying I should have known this because I knew someone months ago. They were telling me they were actually using Chat GPT within Canva. And so they were like using it for emails, like email write-ups, templates that they needed. This is for their corporate 9 to 5 presentations, all within Canva. And I'm like, really? You can do all that within, like, they didn't need to leave Canva. They were in there doing all these different things. This is a while back. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you.
You could have given me 1 million guesses. I would have never guessed
Never.
Canva.
Yeah, I'm actually going to subscribe to Canva just because
I was thinking the same thing.
if nothing else, I want to learn how they're doing it so well, right? Because they've solved the how do you get everyday users to love your platform. So
Yes.
that's a great learning opportunity for people like us.
I agree. I was thinking the same thing, John. I was like, I think I'm going to upgrade. I've had the free version for years now, and even the free version is impressive. Like really haven't felt the need to upgrade. So they've been pretty generous with what they allow you to use. But yeah, this latest update, I'm like, I think I'm going to have to upgrade now. So yeah, crazy.
I guess we'll wrap it up there. If you can, like, subscribe, and check out our other videos that we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one.
See everyone.